Talking about target markets and market segmentation. Market segmentation looks at how do we break up the market. Target markets dealing with the question of who are we selling this product to. So when we think about target markets, we're trying to think about how attractive they are. So that's what you're talking about. You're trying to choose a target market that is particularly attractive because you're trying to persuade people that this is going to make it happen for your business. So we come to this definition. A target market is a relatively homogenous. So homogenous means similar group of consumers that are going to react to your business marketing in the same way. So for example, it might be a group of people with the same interest, the same hobbies. They're going to react the same way. People who play football might be excited about discounted tickets to go and watch the Roar play. People who aren't interested in football, they're not going to be so interested. So what is it about in the similar group that allows people to react in that same way? And some businesses don't get too worried about it. Okay, McDonald's, for example, Lotto, they just say, here's the target, here's the message, and a lot of people are going to be attracted by it. They're dealing with a big group of customers, and your business might be like that. I don't think that's a smart way to go for the assignment. I think you want to get yourself down to like a niche market that you can really describe and measure and have strategies that you can target. That's more interesting from the perspective of meeting the criteria. So if you have a business with an interesting twist, that's going to be powerful. And this is the opposite of an undifferentiated market, a niche market. And that means a small market that has a closely defined group of consumers. So for example, there's a vegetarian restaurant that's just opened up near where I live. So they have a pretty niche group of customers. People who have made the choice, generally people who made the choice to be vegetarian. There might be other groups in there. There might be other groups that we'll talk about later, but that's probably going to be their primary one. So here are some ways that we actually look at measuring, and in your assignment you can talk about the target market. What are the demographics? That might be things like age. What income do they earn? Geographic, where do they live? If you've got a bricks and mortar business, a real world business, it might be people who live within a 2 or 3 kilometre radius. And behavioural. So for example, a vegetarian restaurant, they're probably targeting people who've chosen to be vegetarian or maybe had someone who's a vegetarian in the family. Other behavioural things might be football. We talked about cheap, raw tickets. Let's have a look, dig down into demographics a little bit more because that's more complex. And you don't have to describe all of these, but if you've got 4 or 5, that'll go a long way to putting together a view of who might be your customers. So demographics include age, gender, ethnicity, education, family size, income, religion, occupation. All of those things might be the demographics that you use. So you've got geographical, that's easy. Where are you selling? An online business might be all of Australia, it could be all around the world. Demographics are these things. And then you get to behavioural stuff. Right? What characteristics they display as a shopper? Okay, who's going to be out with a fancy iPhone first? Are they the early adopter shoppers? Do they have interests and hobbies that bring them together? Lifestyle decisions, fitness. And what's this like? Do they see their product being associated with social position? Right? So there might be an elite product like flying Qantas or buying a Mercedes, something like that. Now, this is a fairly important graph. I might just expand a little on the screen, given it's important. Okay. So the first thing is, if you want to go through this process, this is more A-level stuff, these diagrams. This comes from that Cotter marking book, which is a little bit beyond what the textbook does. Right? So the first thing you've got is marketing segment. You want to work out the actual segment you target. So you start by saying, how are you going to segment it? Are you going to segment it on geography and age and income and maybe an interest? Skateboarding, for example. So that might be the first thing. And then once you've got a few markets, you look at what their characteristics might be. Then you start to say, how attractive are the different target markets? So for example, let's say we had a vegetarian restaurant. Let's go one step further. Let's say it was a vegan vegetarian restaurant. So one target market is people who've chosen to be vegan. A second target market might just be people who are healthy, who choose to eat in a healthy way. And when you start to look at this attractiveness, you might say, well, actually, there aren't that many vegans. I don't know what the numbers are, but I would imagine it's not a big part of the population. But targeting towards people who are really excited by the idea of healthy eating when they dine out, because usually when you dine out, it's probably less healthy than what you eat at home. That might become a very attractive target market segment. So that's the next step, is saying how attractive is it? And then what's the message going to be for each group? So if you want to follow through this process, it's quite a sophisticated process that you can look at. Equally, you can choose to have a different number of messages and segments. Right? So here you've got, this is like McDonald's. They've got one message, it's Mac time, or Hungry Jack's, the burgers are better, and they just set that out to the market. That's what they do. This here might be a little bit more like that vegan restaurant. They might have one message where they're trying to target vegans, and so there are probably some specific ways to do it. This is why I say a niche market is good. How would you target people, do you think? If you're just opening a vegan restaurant, what are some ways that you would target that message to them? Anyone think of some ways that would be pretty specific? Sam?
You would emphasise the fact that you've got no animal products.
Okay, that would be the message, no animal products. Vegan, certified vegan, and maybe you might include things like the owners of vegans or something like that. Okay? But when you get to targeting it, you might be saying, well, a great way to do that might be through advertising on Facebook pages that are set up for vegan communities. Or you might advertise through health food stores that sell a lot of vegan products. I don't know if there's Vegan Weekly magazine or something like that instead of Women's Weekly, right? But you might look at what media, as there's some specific media around that. Okay, but you can see how when you've got a niche, you can start to think about how I can actually target and communicate with that group of customers. So that might be one, and then there might be the healthy food message. And you might do that more broadly. You might advertise at some gyms. You might advertise at general health food shops. Okay. You might advertise in the local fun run. Where's that engagement? So you'd have two different messages, one about being vegan, genuinely vegan, one about health, and the two different segments, right? And same thing here, you might have one message that appeals to a few different groups of customers. But I think that's quite a sophisticated way to look at it. Very last slide, okay, for today. This looks at just how you can actually use some of that demographic information to break things up. So income, family size, age, gender, those sort of things. Right. So it's replicating what we've talked about before. But that's target market. Right. If you can use some of this theory to explain why you've selected the group of people that you have to target, then you will be in pretty strong shape.